To China, is Africa seen as one country, or is it seen as regions, or is it seen as 53, 54 countries? How are they looking when they're trading with Africa? Do they say, I'm trading with Africa as though it's one country? Or do they say, we're trading with Africa, doing investments in Africa as though it's regions? Like they have markets, regional markets? Or are they looking at individual African countries on a case-by-case basis? I think in that case, can they play one country against the other?
I don't know about playing one country against the other, but I think they're definitely looking at African countries rather than looking at it as you can't paint a brush, and I don't think they're painting a brush.
Okay.
Their Belt and Road project started with just a few countries, and those were the coastal countries. That's Kenya, Tanzania, Djibouti, where by the way they'll now have a military base, and then inside Ethiopia.
Yeah.
And the kind of infrastructure they brought to those was, ports.
Yeah.
They're finding a railway between Mombasa and Nairobi, and that is extending to Naivasha, and it will be extending to the border with Uganda and ultimately to Kigali.
Yeah.
In Ethiopia, they have, I hope, developed some factories in, textile factories, and that has been, good for that government with a lot of labor and workforce that is that needs to be employed. So I don't think they're painting a brush, and in the extended countries like Uganda, Rwanda, you see them doing different things.
Yeah.
For instance, in Uganda, they're into power. They're funding that, besides the railway that they're doing with Kenya. So I don't think they're painting a brush per se. With other countries like Angola, they used to, the regional interest was because of the resource.
Okay.
So I wouldn't say they're painting a brush.
Okay, so if I look at
But having said that, sorry, Magnus, but having said that, I think Africa on its part, and these are not just my thoughts, but many observers have said them, and even the African leaders like Paul Kagame, who is the chairman of the AU, have to really be more strategic in their thinking with what they want from this relationship with China. And, them presenting the framework of the AU is one thing. We hope that can organize the voice to be more, to really understand what they want from the table as they speak to China.
Because the reason I asked that also is that in dealing with Europe, especially, I noticed that Africans were looking at not trading one by one with Europe, but going to Europe as a united force so that they will be able to get what they want collectively. When I said, having one country played against the other, it was in that context. So if Africa is going to China on a country by country basis, then what's the FOCAC for then? What's the Central African theme? What's the thing that Africa wants if they are not speaking as one voice when they go there?
I think speaking as one voice is a work in progress.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, development is going to come to individual countries.
Yeah.
If they're building a road or a port, it's going to come to it. Creating linkages is understood, but at the end of the day, all countries have their own processes, have their own ways of doing things, and this development will happen in those countries. But the issue of speaking with one voice, which ultimately will lead to one market and one bargaining voice, is a work in progress.
Okay.
As you may know, there are many countries that signed onto the Continental Trade Agreement.
Yeah.
I think it's still a long, long way to go, but it's a step.
Yeah.
I think in the right direction. And the things that they're talking about that will ultimately bring linkages among the African countries themselves, I think are meaningful.
Did you notice that just on the eve of the meeting, Theresa May toured Africa, Angela Merkel toured Africa. Of course, before then, just a little bit, Macron came to Africa. Was it because they had seen the calendar and they knew that FOCAC was coming and they needed to talk to the African leaders before they went to Beijing? Do you think that that's why they came about at the same time?
I think Africa is definitely in the spotlight.
Yeah.
May come because she wants to make friends. The UK is on the verge of leaving Europe. There's a lot of uncertainty. and it's they will want to do bilateral agreements.
Yeah.
Because currently it's Africa and EU, and of course some bilaterals, but it's really Africa. So when they get out, they'll need to do bilaterals. So they have to strengthen where they have strength,
yeah,
and then they have to look for new opportunities where they ain't.
Yeah.
And I mean, Marco did not just come to say hello to President Buhari. She also has her own battles to fight for Germany and Europe in the context of what's happening in the world. You have seen a lot of friction between Germany and the US, with the America First policy of President Trump. Even if he says America First does not mean America alone, but all that really requires these countries to spread out.
Yeah.
And China has been here for a long time in Africa too. It's time for it to also kind of get new friends and strengthen the friendships that are there, because it will need these friendships. As for Africa, again, the messages from some of the leaders that spoke at the FOCAC, their work is cut out.
Yeah.
They need to understand what they want from the whole new world order that is getting reshaped at the moment, and that is going into a direction of probably a multipolar world order.
So the Europeans, do they see themselves in competition now with China? Do you think that there is a chance, there's an opportunity for Africa to start to demand less stringent conditionalities from European institutions? Because if you don't give it to us, we're going to go to China. You see, we are getting 60 billion here.
I think the relationship between Africa and the Europeans and the US will stay.
Okay.
And the institutions of the IMF and the World Bank, in the framework with which they work, has certain advantages to African governments. And that is because, of course, there are very many governments that are either young or in transition or still sorting out a couple of things. And they need support. And we've seen that some of these institutions actually help. We have not only seen it in Africa, we have seen it in Europe, in Greece, in Portugal, and they have the advantages. So for the much of the advantages the Africans can get from the Bretton Woods institutions, I think they will still continue to look for those. But there are also merits that they look for from China, which they have not been getting from Europe and the US. Yeah. And I think they should look for those. Yeah. So I think it's good to have choices.
Yeah.
But Africa's work is still cut out. They need to know what they want, and they need to speak strongly about it.
Yeah. Is this a new economic colonialism?
I have heard that. I don't know if it's a new economic colonialism.
Yeah.
But what I hear from African governments when you talk to them is that, yes, we get this money and then we put it in real things, and that helps us, develop. But they're also mindful of some of the accusations on China that come from the West. Trump talking about property rights and things like that. So I think people are kind of awake. But, like the leaders are saying again in Africa, they still need to think more strategically about what they want from this relationship. Otherwise, it will be sad if you wake up 50 years from now and nothing has happened.
Yeah. Well, what happens at the United Nations when the Chinese want supporters on some very important position where maybe they are in opposition to the United States? And they're looking to, hey, I just gave you 60 billion last week, and I got $170 billion trade with you. The Americans only have 55 billion. Who do you side with here? What do you do?
I think that will be a complicated conversation because, it's not like Africans are moving from the West to East.
Yes.
They are still taking on, they are still in technical cooperation.
Yeah.
And still have financial exposure with the West. So I think that will be a very difficult conversation to have on who supports who.
Yeah. David, thank you so very much.
Thank you.
You're wonderful. Let's do this again.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.